And hello, and welcome to AleksConnects Creative Sandbox. My name is Alex, and let's continue our Fanart Project Angry Birds vs. Transformers. Yep. So, super late start, but either way, even it's late, it's still a start. Sorry about that. So let's just go launch Krita and see what we have here. So previous recording was lost. That's why the reason why I actually started super late, because I tried to take a special precautions to make sure that I'm not going to lose another recording ever again. And it kind of involves a lot of pretty complex stuff with a different computer, so basically I'm not going to talk about this. It's not probably that interesting. So basically I'm just going to record what I'm doing on a different computer. That's it. And it's notebook, and like, even if there's going to be a power shortage or whatever, it still will maintain, because again, notebook, it's not going to be affected by it. Yes, so basically let's continue. So previous session that I lost for the most part, I talked about design elements, how to properly work with the composition. We talked about that we need to work with composition inside the composition, so composition is not going to finish on this thing. There's a lot of compositional elements that work like inside composition and outside composition. Again, everything that kind of works in here. This is our main composition. Then we have the primary focus composition. Then we have a tertiary focus or secondary focus composition, tertiary focus composition, and inside of each of these compositions we have a small composition. So for instance, if we're going to talk about tertiary or primary focus composition, and our primary focus is or are our characters, so let's just turn off our composition. So our primary focus composition is the red one, and inside of this composition we need to consider how things are working. So how things are interacting with each other, how they're placed, how their gestures are going to be, what type of things overall like we feel when we look at them. Then we have inside compositions, which is the separate compositions for each character, how these compositions are working, how these gestures are working, and do they work with the whole illustration, and do they work separately. So they kind of have to work on the overall composition, but they have to work independently too. And sometimes we need to like balance in between, because it's not always possible to make them work independently. Yep. So yeah, same for this one. For this one, they're just separate one inside of big one, or inside primary. Then we go into the secondary. Of course, when we talk about secondary composition, we still have things that work with each other, and we still have things, small compositions or separate compositions inside of this composition, which will work just like in terms of where to place these apples, how these apples are going to look independently, and how they're going to look as a whole. And like, we still need to figure out how these are going to work in overall composition, not only in the secondary. So when it comes down to the composition, as I said before, it could get super complex. The only thing that you need to understand probably is the structure of any composition. So it's like it's like a folder structure. So you have a big folder, which is the whole thing. Then you will double click on this folder. You will get into a like the content of this folder, and you will see different folders, which is going to be a primary composition, secondary composition, and tertiary composition, and additional composition. And within all of these folders, you will see like, if you're going to click on a folder with the primary composition, you will see another folders with each character composition, etc. So the same for Yeah, and if we need to, for instance, if we already worked on primary focus composition, then we are just basically getting back to the previous directory or directory. Then we will go into the secondary focus directory and work on it, which is the secondary composition. And then if we need to go further, of course we are going to work with this separate composition inside of this composition. So basically it's like, I don't know, it's like moving between directories in your PC or whatever on your personal computer, when you're just basically moving in between folders, opening one folders, closing others, or moving in between these directories. So this is the simplest thing how it's going to work if you're not if I'm not explaining myself enough. So yeah, for the most part this is the thing, and usually this is the way how we could work with the composition, or at least look at the compositions this way. So yeah, let's continue. Again, as you see right now, the timing of this session, or the timer for this session, is not determined. So there's a how do you probably the question marks, and there's a reason for that, because I don't know how much I'm going to stream. Like, actually, I could finish in 20 minutes, I could finish in 1 hour, or whatever. So again, it's all going to be depend on a lot of factors. But so far, let's just not bother ourselves with how much time we have, but actually do something. So yeah, okay. So previously we designed this one, so I consider this one designed, or at least yeah, I think we could consider it designed. No, let's just consider it designed. At least for the basics. When it comes down to, and ideally I need to go into designing donuts, pies, cakes and chocolate in here and properly place them. So basically today we're just going to work with this one, because we'll probably get back to this one on rendering stage. As I said previously, I'm not going to bother on creating super complex designs for the plates and cups. We will keep them this way, because again, I don't want to like create distractions. So in order to not create distractions, I think we're going to keep them the way they are, at least for now. And on rendering changes, if they're going to look too boring, we could add small elements of design on the rendering stages. It's not going to be a problem, because again, we're going to create an illusion of reality using values, and usually it's not that hard to do, like to showcase a specific look. Yeah, and also I decided that I'm not going to store any recordings on Twitch. I don't know, I'm just, again, all of these recordings I'm still going to upload on Twitch. Like creative recordings I'm going to upload on Twitch, and non-creative recordings, they're like such as Magic, MTG Study, I'm going to put on YouTube in Full HD. So as actually these creative recordings too. So in 720p, I guess I'm going to put them on Twitch, and in Full HD I'm going to put them on YouTube. Not all, of course, but again, for now I'm just probably decided not to put additional thing with storage. They're still going to be deleted, so I don't like see any point of putting recordings on, like store them. especially is the fact that I'm listening to my favorite music, and it's like a couple of songs are going to be copyrighted in terms of like for storage. They probably work for streaming at least, because again they are kind of streamable on YouTube. That means that they're free for listening, and yeah. And I think the music that is playing is kind of like works as streamable music, and creators of this music is getting money from it, I think, or at least in my knowledge. Okay, chocolate, cake, pie, donuts. So yeah, let's just recreate donuts, because again I lost my recording, and because of this our donuts just were broken. I kind of like how this donut is looking. Like, actually I like its design, so maybe we need to just basically copy it and use it, because this is actually a pretty looking donut. It's pretty close to the donut that I would want this donut to look in terms of the size and etc. This is one of the things that I'm kind of noticed during my like artistic experience. Then sometimes if you're trying to draw something accurately, it looks like it basically looks bad. I don't want to use the word with sh. Yeah, so for the most part, like, this is one of the things that kind of I noticed. So if you try to create something super pretty, it's always going to look robotic and bad. But if you are like working on sketching, sometimes like sketches are so organic looking for some reason. You're not like that trying to put things right, but still they look better than if you're going to, okay, I'm going to create a awesome donut in here and it's going to look awesome. No, it's not going to look awesome. But why it's not looking awesome? I don't know. This is probably one of the things. Maybe the fact that we're putting something first, like with a gesture, and not thinking about its small elements, creates this awesome look. I don't know. So when it comes to the donuts, we need to establish the perfect shape for them. That is going to look like donut even without identifications or additional information that this is a donut. Yeah, this one could look like a donut, but no, it's not the same. This one could look like a donut. Let's just skip this one for now. I kinda ruined this one. So let's just go through references and see how donuts are going to look. So yeah, donuts are actually pretty full, so they have pretty like thickness to them. They're not like cookies, of course, but it all depends on the type of donut, I guess. Everyone is going to create them different, but like in reality, like the last time that I eat donuts was probably 10 years ago, something like this, maybe even earlier, when I was a little, I guess, because I don't remember any closer like period of my adult life that I ate donuts, so definitely that was a long time ago. So yeah, and as I remember them, I always loved when the donuts were like not like thin. These thin donuts, they're not that cool to eat them, but when they're bigger, it's much more like aesthetically pleasing for somehow. I don't know, it's strange, but the fact that you need to squeeze them in order to eat them, like, I don't know, it's pretty interesting. And the same kind of works for the hamburger, I guess, and these big things. although I tried not to eat them at all because I'm consider it as a junk food. But like sometimes I could like eat one thing in a year or in a couple of months. Of course, it doesn't have to be super big, but moderately big to be able to eat it. So yeah, I think we will make donuts pretty big and pretty high in height, or width and height, yeah, in height. So that means that, and I will probably add slight level of like, so they're not going to be super round. So something like here. Let's just duplicate this element. As I said, it's all about subtleties. Subtleties and subtleties. A little bit smaller this part. And the thing in here. This is the thing about like complex shapes or simple shapes. As I said, like previously, when you're working with the simple shapes, it's like it seems that they have to be super easy to draw, but sometimes when you're drawing them, they're not looking good. Like when you draw them, they're not looking good, and you kind of like asking yourself a question: why the heck they're not looking good? They're super simple form, and I can draw a circle, but why it's not looking good? Because again, it's all about subtleties. These subtle changes, this small, like, I don't know, the small element of roundness or sharpness added in here will completely change the feel of the subject. It's all about subtleties. Okay, these donuts definitely need to be bigger. So let's just bring back and make it too small. Let's hope that undo pool will allow me to do this. Oh, probably not. Snap. Because if I'm going to make it larger again, we're going to lose details. Again. Let's just make donuts somewhat like this size. Not bigger. Slightly bigger, maybe. I don't want to create too many donuts in here, as I said before. There's going to be, I wanted to put enough donuts for us to be able to just basically showcase what is this. The size of this hole in a donut is super important, because if it's going to be too big, it's going to look like a I don't know how this thing is called actually in English. Let's figure it out. This one actually is going to imply that there's a type of frosting could be in here. It's pretty cool. No, not here. We need to go here. Bublik. Bagels, yeah, definitely. I knew the word, I just forget about it. So yeah, they just basically going to look like bagels, and of course donuts are not bagels, and they have to look different from bagels. No, actually bagels kind of look like donuts. It depends on what type of... This is actually strange. Okay, apparently it's only called it like this in Russian. Baranka. Yep. Yeah, so basically these are bagels. But I know, I kind of consider bagels Again, there's a different type of bagels. I'm talking about these type of bagels that have pretty big hole in them. It's like a wheel bagels, I don't know. Of course there's a bagels of different type. The bagels that I'm looking at, they're pretty full and they have pretty random holes in them depending on who actually make them. But donuts are kind of, I don't know, a little bit more controlled. But yeah, you could mix up the donuts with the bagel, especially if you don't have materials, because like the only thing that will help us to determine like the difference between bagels and donuts is probably the material of it, because bagels are going to be slightly reflective, or not reflective, but slightly glossy, when the donuts are for the most part not glossy at all. There's no glossiness to them. So this is one of the elements that will make things right. Okay, so yeah, and as you see, they're not reflective at all. Like there's no glossiness in the donuts. They're kind of diffused, and they have a translucency to them too. So they kind of diffused translucent. Yeah. So we will definitely make donuts like donuts. I like these donuts, how they look. They're pretty round and pretty controlled, but still they have some elements of sharpness to them, which we'll add, of course. And again, the rest is going to be created by the actual how do you call it? Work with values, so rendering, yeah. And of course, placement for them is going to be relatively, like, I wouldn't say random, but again, as I said before, it's pretty hard to place them and get and not get into tangents. The more objects we have, the harder it is to place them properly to avoid tangents. So we're definitely going to try to put them properly to avoid tangents, but it's not going to be easy, because the tangents could be created by the overlapping of the objects themselves, and actually there's a lot of ways to do that. It's not the best. I'm just looking through references just on the Google. Let's just continue to move them. Again, there's a lot of overlapping like possibilities, or not possibilities, but yeah, so we could create overlaps in between these donuts themselves, or not overlaps but tangents. We could create tangents with the plate itself, so of course they have to be avoided, because if we're going to put this donut on this line, it's going to create a bad tangent. The same kind of could be in here, but actually this is we could allow ourselves to put on this tangent, because again this line is not going to be for the most part time present. It's going to be barely visible. There's a slight difference in value is going to be present in here, so I think this line is not going to be super like if this thing is going to be on the edge of the plate, nothing bad about it, because again, it's not that problematic. And also, of course, we need to consider the fact that this donut is going to be slightly smaller this one's slightly bigger. We're already kind of having this problem of visuals that these donuts are the same size, but this appears bigger because it's like further in space, and it creates illusion that this donut actually bigger, but it's the same donut. I didn't change its size. So this is how our brain kind of tries to make this donut bigger, and it created because, again, it needs to be further in space. Just make it smaller. And we need to make it smaller enough for our eye to see this donut as something that kind of the same size as this donut. Okay, this could work. And also, one of the problems that I'm kind of constantly facing when we're working with manual placement, and by manual placement I mean the 2D placement, because if we would create this scene in 3D, it would be much easier to place these things. We could just place this donut, see the distance between these two donuts, and place the second donuts not touching the first one. But when you don't have this luxury, when you're working with 2D, like, you need to imagine how these donuts are going to separate, because they can't touch each other in space. And if you're going to put this donut too close to this one, they're just going to interject or intersect, and it's not going to be realistic, of course. So we need to try to like figure out what like the distance between two, and are they touching or not. Usually we need to use perspective in order to understand are they going to touch or not. We just like creating, I don't think we have enough space for it, unfortunately. Just create a different layer. So one of the ways to ensure that these things are not going to touch, like behind, first of course by eye, but second is to creating projections. So we're creating projection in here for this donut. We're kind of figuring out that this donut is going to go somewhere in here, probably. And this is the area where the projection for this donut doesn't have to be present. So now we could see that these points are pretty far from each other. I don't think that this is understandable, though. I kind of know what I'm doing, like what I'm showing, but because we're working with a small pixelization, it's almost invisible. There's a lot of lines in here. It's pretty hard to properly showcase them. Let's try to make these less visible for you to see a little bit better. So maybe this one a little bit better. Yeah, so basically we're kind of projecting like the extreme points of this donut that could touch the other donut, and by projecting them it's allow us to understand how far these elements from each other. They're pretty close, especially with this line, so we have someone like this in distance. Yeah, so they're pretty close, but they're not touching each other. And this is the thing, this is one of the ways to make sure how these things are going to look. Again, we try to create something similar when we try to place this one closer to the table or further from the table, when we try to create the lines of intersection and the extreme points, and see how these extreme points are going to overlap with other objects. So yeah, this is one of the ways to do that. Okay, let's just duplicate. Duplicate. Yeah, this is actually the time when I'm usually ending stream and going to sleep, because it's too freaking AM. But the thing is, like, right now it's kind of holidays, and like from January 1st are going to be a definitely crazy days in terms of the time. Everyone is going to go to sleep pretty late, and just we could like work a little bit later during these holidays, for instance, till 3 a.m. or till 4 a.m. Not till 4, definitely not, because I need to go to sleep at least at 5 a.m. and wake up in 12. Still try to sleep normal number of hours. Sleep is super important for your health. So is the food that you're eating. You would probably wouldn't want to eat donuts every day. It's not that healthy, I guess. Green food. Yeah, I wanted to do something like this. I wanted to make this donut be slightly tilted. If I'm going to put this donut, no, there's going to be another one. And also, I think I'm not using the right perspective for them though. Like, if I'm going to make this one, oh, something bad is there. Oh, we need to erase this thing. Yeah, if I'm going to make this donut, what? Oh, bigger. It's probably not going to be like perfect for the perfect perspective. I'm trying to compare it with this one. It definitely doesn't look exactly like that. Probably, but again, we can't shift it. The shifts are, we could shift them slightly maybe. Yeah, we definitely need to shift them before copying them and rotating them. Just delete all copied donuts, because again, this donut kind of works for probably this perspective or for something like this. If this donut is going to be placed in here, it kind of works normal, but if it's going to be placed in here, it's going to be distorted slightly, and this slight distortion is definitely necessary in here because it doesn't look the proper for this perspective. Oh, come on, how many things are there? Okay, good. So that means that we need to shift it slightly. But again, the shift needs to be super slight. Not like this, of course. Trying to figure out in how I need to shift it. In what side? This way? Because this one seems shifted there. That implies that it's in the following the right pivot point. Oh, not pivot point. Again, I'm constantly comparing pivot points with the vanishing points. Vanishing point. Vanishing point. No. By the way, right now I'm recording on 2 microphones of the same type that are clipped to my shirt. This is so funny. It looks strange. Yeah, if I'm going to shift it, it's definitely going to look better. So, like, right now we mirrored, it looks fine. But if we're going to go back, and we mirror, it's not going to look right. So this donut doesn't look right for this perspective. it looks kind of fine in here, but once we mirror it, it kind of looks shifted there. That means that it's not going to work with this perspective for this thing. And especially it's super obvious when we have two similar object types, such as sphere, or not sphere, but like the elliptical shapes. All elliptical shapes that close to each other has to have the same elliptical distortion. Let's call it like this. And if they're not, it's going to look weird. So we'll probably need to shift it using this mirror method by mirroring. So right now it looks kind of normal, but I'm still seeing that it's wrong. And once we mirror it, we definitely see that it's wrong. It's like it's completely works for the different perspective. But in normal state, it looks fine. That means that we need to make it for our perspective. Yeah, this one looks better, and of course slightly rotated to look right. Again, remember, we need to create it, we don't have to create it super perfectly. We need to create it the way that it's not going to create a distraction for the viewer. Okay, it's a little bit better. And why I'm working only with one donut, because again, if we're going to put one donut the right way, then the rest of the donuts are going to be just copied and slightly changed. Good. I think it works. Just take back changes. And ideally, like, let's try to do one thing. I don't want to lose the level of details for this donut. So let's try to create a transform mask, change the donut the way that we want, and then apply this mask. And let's see if it's going to destroy this resolution or not, because it's kind of interested in that. Again, we're going to properly place it by mirroring it. Okay, this one looks good. So this one already looks a little bit twisted, but going to rotate it properly. Actually looks kind of right for the perspective. So again, shifting, rotating, shifting, rotating. That way we could create an illusion of perspective for elliptical shapes, because this way we're creating a level of distortion for these elliptical shapes. We're still going to lose some details, I guess. Let's try to apply this mask. Again, right here on Krita, applying mask usually by merging or flattening layer. That way you're applying mask. I wouldn't say that we lost details. We lost some things, but I think it's still a little bit better than if we would use something like just a transformation. Transforming tool. Good. It works from almost every angle. Yes, let's keep this donut this way. And now let's just duplicate it and place these donuts the way that we would need them, or we would want them. Again, avoid selections at this point. Again, this way they're going to intersect. Usually you do in this placement by eye. There is a way to tell how far objects need to be placed from one another in order to not touch. Usually determines by the outer lines. Maybe there is an actual rule or pattern which we could use to determine this. So for instance, if objects are overlapping too much in this way, that means that they're intersecting. So there's the acceptable level of overlapping, I think, before it will become unrealistic. So for instance, if I would put this donut closer to this cup, so this is of course acceptable. This is not acceptable because it creates tangent, and now we need to find the proper level of overlapping for it to not work. So for instance, this is probably not going to work because it's too much. It will overlap with this part. It's pretty obvious. But again, this is a different shape, so with different shapes it's a little bit different, of course. If we're going to try to make this donut overlap this teapot, of course we can go with the tangent, and we can't go too far in here because it will touch. But this is probably acceptable level. It doesn't. It's not touching, or it's touching, but it's not it's not intersecting. It's just touching this teapot. This one is too touching too. No, this is probably not touching, but this is touching. But it all depends how high it is. So in what line they are actually. So right here we could go with a bigger overlapping by assuming that this donut is in front of it. If we're going to with the same line of placement, then it's going to be somewhere in here. Maybe this one would work, but again, probably not. And the further it goes, the closer we could put it, because we could ignore this overlap. But probably the easiest way to do this is to create, so establish the line of extreme for teapot. So this is the line of extreme for teapot. That means that this is the place where the donut is going to touch our teapot. And then we're just moving this donut the way that it's not going to touch this line. So right here is going to touch, that means that we can't. So right here, this one works. So this will not work, not going to work, it will overlap. So we could move donuts within this line, not putting it higher, and that way we will be safe in terms of the placement. But the problem is here that it could create like tangents, and we're definitely not going to be able to put donut like this because it will create a tangent in here. So that means that we probably will choose something like this, move it in these restriction zones. The same goes for the back line, but it's going to look a little bit differently there though. Oh yeah, for the back line, so for this line, the extreme for the donut is going to be the top line, and we need to make sure that this top line is not going to intersect with the extreme line of the teapot. For the back, we're going to use the inside line with this inside line for them to not intersect. So, yes, so this is the safe placement for the donut behind. So placing donut in here is going to make sure that they're not going to touch, or they're barely going to touch. So the same way we need to make things for that. Again, we have apparently today is a lot of theory, but again, I'm just making up this on my, like, not on my own, but like on a go. So I didn't prepare this thing, how to work with this. I'm just trying to explain myself how I need to think when working with these elements. Oh, so since this is the extreme for the donut, I think it's, if we're going to use the work this way, it's pretty easy to establish the extremes for the donut. Of course, we're going to use these extremes for the donuts a little bit carefully, because we need to put them slightly back, because the actual extreme for the donut is this part, the middle part. So, but working with this one's pretty good to make sure they're not going to overlap. Or establishing two extremes that we could work with. But for the most part, one extreme is more than enough. See, again, working with this extreme and I'm comparing it to this extreme. So this is the safe area for placing donuts. It's not going to look like it's overlapping or intersecting. The same goes for this one. If we're going to place donuts on the back, this bottom line needs to stay close to this one, not intersect with it. Of course, donut needs to be smaller in order to make sure that it's going to look properly. But this is the safest area. It's like drawing a circle by the other circle, or drawing a ellipse with drawing this ellipse with this ellipse. Like, it's just like, I don't know. I think this is the best way to describe it. This is the way to make sure that elliptical shapes are not going to overlap. The same, I think, is going to work for the and elliptical shapes are spheres, and something that works with the cut spheres, and something like this. We probably should use the same for this one. I didn't use it in here. I kind of went with the eye placement, using it by eye. Oh damn, I actually want to eat so crazy. Yes, so maybe I will go through an hour session only. I don't know, because I kind of want to super eat, and I can't go food like and eat snacks or something fast. Yeah, today is going to be definitely a theoretical one. Okay, let's just make this one smaller. Again, slightly smaller, not that big of a difference. And again, this one will overlap, so we need to make sure that it's close to this inside line. So this one is not going to overlap, or overlap barely. Or not overlap, but again, touch. It's going to be a little bit harder when we're working with putting these donuts on top of each other. It definitely will create some problems there. And also we need to figure out how close this donut to our back. It's actually pretty easy. Again, we'll continue in these this extreme inside, creating this extreme, putting it in here, and figuring out where this one will overlap or intersect. Again, the thing about drawing, it's always like you need to imply things, so you can just make sure that things are going to not touch. it's not that easy, and there's no rules for that for the most part. I could like sit in here and make up rules on the go, which probably the thing that I'm doing, but I don't know. In the end, it's just going to, for the most part, work by eye. So the more experience you get, the clearer these things are going to look or work for you. Okay, now my eye actually gets used to this thing, and now I'm actually seeing that this thing's probably not going to work for this perspective. I need to slightly change it. And don't forget rotating it, because again, it's closer to us. That means that it's going to be a little bit it's going to look a little bit differently. And from the far, it still looks kind of extreme, but the good extreme, because this plate actually looks extreme, and this thing looks the same extreme as this plate. That way, they kind of belong to each other. It's all about subtleties. And it took me a while to figure this out, you could say that, okay, it's all about subtleties and that's it, and it could be the truth, but it's like the difference is, are you willing to accept this truth now, or you have to go through a lot in order to face this truth and actually use it? Because I knew that art is all about subtleties pretty early, but I didn't use this knowledge. I just, okay, it's all about subtleties, but how the heck I could work around about with the subtleties, or how I could use them. But then, the more I get experience, the practical, which was not that much, but for the most part theoretical, with some practical implementations, the more I understood this. Now, I understand it better. Not fully and completely, but there's still a lot of work, but at least now I could make up some rules. Now I have the ability to make up my own rules. I guess it's the thing that artists are aiming for. First, you're learning some rules, and then you will be able to make up your own rules. I guess once you're starting to make up your own rules, it kind of means that you're on a wrong, or not on a wrong path, but on the right path, because it means that you understand the basic rules and you can manipulate these basic rules in order to create something that you would understand better. Or you're pretty close to understanding basic rules, but you're not sure that these are the rules or not. Okay, I'm stuck in 2 donuts. We need to create a third one. Definitely. I'm going to create a third one. Again, we need to create them from the original, because the original is less damaged. So the third donut is going to be, of course, even smaller, because right now it applies to two perspective, two vanishing points, the one that's there and the one that's there. So this one kind of applied to two points too, but it was not that far. This one is going to be a little bit further away, so that means it's going to be smaller. I think I'm going to put it super far. Almost at the edge of the... And again, make sure that we're not going to create any tangents, so this one is going to create a silhouette. We could place donuts in here, and again, it's going to be a little bit more extreme. Problem is, we're not seeing the thing that will allow us to put it proper way, so let's just make it less visible. Let's go through the fruits. No. where is our layer? Accessories, content, copy of tops. There's a lot of layers. I should probably make them like in one layer or in one group, because I need to be able to manipulate all of these. Stand. The thing is, W2 works with a lot of things, so we're not going to be able to put it there. We'll still maintain. Okay, that means that we need to create a group for them. Let's do that. Let's create a group for them. Although groups inside of the groups, it could make Krita overloaded, because I created pretty complex things in here, and it could result in crashes if you will go too complex. For the most part, when you work, you don't need super complexity, especially the more experience you'll get, the less complexity you need for your project. But again, it all depends on the type of projects that you're working with, because for some projects you need to create pretty complex and versatile illustrations in order to apply changes. So for instance, you have to separate all elements from each other in order to be able to change something, and if clients will demand the change, and not just overdraw things and just basically place things a little bit to the left or to the right, and it will make it better, especially when you're working with art directors, I guess, because they actually know what they're doing for the most part. Okay, so this one is going to be a stand. Let's call it stand plus, because it has additional elements to them, such as VW, W2. Okay, fruits. Let's call it D1. This is donut 1. This is D2. Or D2. Just D2. Donuts 2. This is donut 3. And this is just a layer that I'm going to use for something. I don't know, maybe we're going to use it to make sure that these donuts are not going to look over, like, basically we will use it as W3. Although I already have W3 though. White 3 layer, or no, we just have, yes, we have W3. That means that this one is going to be W4. It's going to use to erase unnecessary things without erasing the donuts themselves, and without creating additional transparency masks to do that. Kind of works. And now we need to make this stand thing look less visible in order to manipulate donuts. This was the whole point of doing this. Kind of forget why I did this. Okay, yeah, donuts kind of works if we're going to place it in here, because again, remember that this area is pretty big. It's not visible in here that this area is pretty big because this donut is relatively close to us. But this area is actually pretty big. We could even move this donut a little bit further in space, but for that, of course, we need to make it slightly smaller, which we're not going to do. Okay, again, our layer of duplication is D1. It's time to create a rotational donut. It's going to be placed somewhere in between these two. Or draw a completely different donut, which is probably the thing that we need to do. Because I can't place donut in here, because it's going to be too far from this one. It's not going to look right. This is kind of a thing, like if I'm going to create, let's try to move this one a little bit further. Again, it can't overlap this part with this extreme. Oh no, that way I'm going to close this thing. I created this empty space in order to suggest how table is going to continue, but as you see, by putting donuts in here, we're going to, it's still going to create this understanding, but I would want to actually keep it. Let's think. I could put this donut in here. But oh no. Go back to the painting. And rotate it like this. Yeah, probably will do this. It's actually going to look pretty cool. That way we will represent the inner, like the bottom part of the donut and the top part of the donut. It's pretty cool. It doesn't look good now because I still need to erase unnecessary lines. It's probably going to be relatively close. And we're still going to see the table line in here. That means that this donut needs to be somewhere in there. And just lie there. Of course, it's going to be the smallest one, because it needs to be placed there without touching this thing inside. Okay, kind of works. Again, not close enough to make this tangent. Not close enough to make this tangent either. By the way, we need to make this donut a little bit smaller. That's why it looks strange, because it has to be smaller. Yeah, kind of works. And again, this line will implement the gesture towards our character. So if the viewer decides to be distracted with this look by these donuts, we always can redirect the viewer. It could go, viewer could go like this, could go like this, like this. So this tilt kind of creates a pretty interesting thing. Let's save this. Yeah, I think we will go in additional half an hour, probably till 3 p.m. or a.m. and then we will finish. So let's just go through additional 30 minutes. I could go 30 minutes more. Again, fortunately today's stream is going to be super small, and I think till the end of the December streams are going to be inconsistent in time, because I need to make sure that at the beginning of this in January I will launch some things on my YouTube channel, and I don't have time to do that, so barely making sure that it's going to be possible. I already need to make them kind of almost final, but it's pretty far. From that, so I don't know, maybe this one is too small. D3, maybe it's too small, it needs to be slightly bigger. Yeah, this one looks a little bit better, but again, it creates almost a tangent. Okay, this one could work. It's the only thing, we need to move this one, second one, now a little bit further. And once I will erase things that do not need to be seen, I will talk about why I made this decision. Because right now it's kind of pointless. It's not going to be clear, I guess. So let's go to the white and draw over things that need to be erased. I'm going to erase these donut lines too, just to make things a little bit clearer. Maybe I will bring them back if it's not going to look good enough. But for the most part, these lines are not going to be present, so they're just in here to make sure that we understand what they're doing, what we're doing, and creating donuts. Yeah, I think I need to erase them because it's kind of it's just a constructional line that allow us to why I didn't erase this one before though, how I could forget it. Okay, we could make our stand the way that it looked before. That way we will be able to see what we need to erase in addition to that. Hello, Skufsan, what's up? How are you doing? Da, 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 da. Did you hear that by April? Da, 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 da. How's your stream went? Oh snap. Freaking donuts. Oh yeah, congrats on 2+ followers. Cool, cool, cool. You have to be happy, not only by this, but because there's a Holidays now! Dee 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 dee. Freaking New Year! It's going to be cool. I'm doing. But in general, it's cool. Yep. Christmas. In America, Christmas is already kind of over. Russian Christmas is still to come. So let's call it New Year. A new year. Yeah, we don't have overlaps in here, which is cool. And this one is almost overlapping, so it's not good. So. Yeah. Yes, it works. Just erase this one slightly. This is too awesome song to talk, so I just listen to it. Yeah, happy sleep, or I don't know how you can sleep happy. I guess you will be happy after you will sleep. Yeah, good night. This is Chester from Linkin Park. Oh, this is funny emote. What emote does? Now, like, pretty cool emote. Okay, let's go in here. Stand W2. That's no. Oh, stand itself, you tell me? Buttons. Buttons. Probably needs to draw this one. Clear. Okay, W2. Now we need to erase the thing that we drawn in here. It's, by the way, in W42. Yes, good. Okay. And now go to the right, and here is this. So yeah, basically the reason why I did this for the most part was because why I decided to move this one slightly, because we need to create the, yeah, it's not the end, let's just bring this one to, for some reason it doesn't properly, no, it looks fine. Bringing back these lines again, they're pretty important, I guess. I'm bringing back this one too. Oh. Let's just see how it's going to look though. So now we probably, for now, no need this. The whole session was donuts. Donuts, donuts, donuts. So yeah, now the reason why I did this. So first, we definitely need to keep these lines in order to understand how these donuts are actually properly placed. We're pretty close right here to a tangent that will create this continuity in here, but since this will rotate, we definitely will make sure that this tangent is not going to happen. What tangent I mean is this one. If it's not clear, no, with the white. Yeah, so this tangent, it kind of creates this line, and this line is just basically goes right away into the plate. So we need to make sure that this tangent is not going to be visible. For that, of course, we need to work with the rendering and make sure that this line is going to go in there. And we definitely need to separate values in here and create this the best way. So we don't have any tangents here, which is cool. We don't have tangents in here either, because kind of a little bit higher. We make sure that we basically avoided most of the tangents, which is good. And in terms of the placement, what I wanted to say is they just need to be placed the way that we're going to see a different amount of information. So for instance, right here we see the most information. So almost everything about this donut we see. With this donut we see less information because there's a small overlapping in here. Ideally this donut needs to present even less information, but again, the reason why I put it a little bit to the right, because I kind of wanted to make sure that there's not going to be overlap between this donut and this donut, or not overlap, but tangents. And also I wanted to make this donut show a little bit more information, because if we're going to place this third donut as it was before, not second donut as it was before, like right here, first problem that we could run into is this tangent. The second problem, it looks too overcrowded, like these donuts are, I don't know, psychologically don't want to leave each other's side, so there's no freedom in between placement. They're kind of condensed into one big chunk of I don't know, donuts. In order to separate them, I decided to kind of move it slightly to the right, and again, because I wanted to reveal a little bit more information about this donut. Because if we're going to put this one in here, it's just going to almost overlap with this donut, and we're going to see only top of this donut. But I wanted to see a side of this donut too, in order for this donut to look like a donut. So yeah, this was just this was the reason behind the particular placement for this donut. Yes, kind of the thing. Yeah, we have about how many minutes? About probably 10 minutes till the end of the session. So let's just sum up things and try to decide, try to figure out if we're moving in the right way or in the right direction. Okay then, so far so good. The only thing about these donuts, one of the reasons why, ideally I wanted to create a donut, I could create donuts the same way as I created them here. So for instance, we could go with the equal distribution, and these donuts wouldn't be that interesting to look at, because we would have one normal donut, or yeah, we would have one normal donut here, and here, and it would look more static if we would do this way. To put one donut in a different position, it creates first the variety in terms of the placement, and it creates a little bit more interest to this area. Ideally, I would place this donut differently too, or this donut a little bit different. Maybe we need to do this, because again, I want to create a little bit more variety. Let's try to rotate this donut slightly and kind of suggest that this donut I don't know how we could justify the way that this donut is rotated this way. Maybe the only justification that I could think of is to change the shape of the donut slightly, because again, not every donut looks the same. But we could make this actually in the rendering by just making sure that this donut is just going to look a little bit smaller in here, and his center is just going to be shifted slightly. So I will think about that on the rendering stage. For now, we're going to keep it this way, because again, some things we still will add a lot of changes to this one. So yeah, the thing that I wanted to talk about before the end of the session is the reason why I decided to go with this donut besides the variety in design. So first, of course, this is the variety in design. You can create a contrast, which is the most desirable element of design that we need to constantly think about. Desirable, not the best word to use, but whatever. The most important element of the design that we need to constantly think about. And creating this direction for us is super important, because again, it creates a variety in direction. It creates variety in direction, it creates variety in placement. So these donuts are kind of placed the same, but they still different because they overlap each other, and they showcase less information each time with each donut. Again, this donut revolves all information. This one kind of hides a little bit, and this one hides almost third of this of information. This one hidden too slightly, but the different direction for it kind of creates a little bit different feeling. The second reason why I decided to place it there like this, because we need to attract attention of the viewer inside our focus, not just pass through it and that's it. So whatever element, whenever a viewer will decide to go, we need to make sure that viewer is not going to leave our illustration. And although by putting this donut like this, it just could create a straight line to the character, but instead I decided to go with this element, because this way if it will it will make sure that viewer will still stay inside of this area for a little bit longer if he or she decides to go in here. Again, just creating an additional path, because the story kinda adds in this area, so this area is pretty important for telling the story. And also, again, it could go in here and story could evolve. So again, there's a lot of dimensions and reasons to go and ways to go. And also, it kind of creates a barrier for the viewer not to go there. It's just like, okay, psychologically I don't want to go there, because this circle, like this line or this cycle, let's say, if we would create a donut in here, it could just create gesture like this or movement like this, which not necessarily the thing that we want. By putting the barrier in here, it's going to prevent the viewer from going there. So viewer will go in here, probably. Viewer could go in using this plate like this. But again, we can't do anything with the plate to interrupt this motion. Well, probably this motion will be interrupted by this line or this line, but hopefully. Yeah, actually we have interruption for this line, for this gesture with this line. So if viewer decides to go there, he or she will be stopped by this one. I could say the same with this donut. It could be interrupted by the plate itself, but it's not something that could interrupt the viewer's eye with the donuts, I think, so it's pretty easy to go outside. I don't know, like, just psychologically it seems right to place the donuts a little bit differently in this area. I definitely wouldn't want to do this the opposite way, so I definitely wouldn't want to place donuts tilted, such as here in here. I don't think that it would look good. And also, like, psychologically, it's just make sure that you will stay in this area for some reason. I don't know. It's just like in terms of the weight. Again, we will talk about compositional weight later, but it just makes this area light and adds weight to this area. It's basically the way of balancing things. The thing is, the balance of this area still is going to be pretty heavy. So this area is going to be pretty heavy, and it's all about the balance. Again, since this is our compositional center, we established it already. We need to balance this area with this area. And the thing is, we have a lot of elements in here. We have Big Bomb, which is psychologically bigger character, and combined elements of this area right now not enough for this area to overweigh. That's why we intentionally created the element that will make sure that psychologically the weight is going to go to this area. But this area has more information, so there's going to be big statues in here, and more statues in here is going to be present. So yeah. So basically, by knowing where I'm going to go, it makes sense to balance things this way. But if working on the illustration further, I will notice that we need to add a little bit more weight in this area. It's not that big of a problem. We could do this by implementing different elements, by making sure that weight is going to be distributed properly. Again, the only thing that we need to remember is where our center line or compositional center. I don't think that I actually created the compositional center in perspective. Let's just create our compositional center to make sure that it's present. So yeah, this is our compositional center. Everything that we're going to create inside of this area and inside of our whole composition needs to be balanced properly. And they kind of going to be counterbalance each other. So for instance, if we're going to talk only about secondary focus, this area is definitely going to overweigh this area of the secondary focus. It's like without question is going to happen, because again, we don't have that much information in here and we have a lot of information in here. But then this will counterbalance the area with characters with this area of characters, which is much bigger. So again, we're creating counterbalance, although it's not counterbalance, it's the opposite. It's weight more in here. So yeah, it actually creates more weight in here. So the secondary composition has more weight to this area. The primary composition has more weight to this area. So that means that we need to counterbalance it with, oh yeah, we will counterbalance it with our tertiary area and an additional area by adding more characters in here and creating more empty space in here. Remember that empty space creates a weight too. So not only an objects in space create a balance, but this empty space will create its own weight. And also by having a super big statue in here, it's definitely will overweight it, or counterweight it. Having statue in here, having statue in here, and only present of statue in here. I think the only thing that we could get rid of is this pile of garbage, because it seems like it will create unnecessary weight. But again, it's going to be much more clear once we will get to the final stages of rendering, because at this point it's pretty hard to make sure that we will maintain the balance. We need to think about the balance and how it's going to be redistributed and changed throughout the whole illustration. But again, as I said, it's going to be kind of, I don't know, here and there. It's not going to be straight, it's not going to be that clear. So yeah, let's just make sure that we're done for today, and that note will finish. So the last thing that we're going to talk about before the end is probably making plans for the next session. Yeah, next session we will just continue to work on putting other elements. So the next elements that we're going to place, I think I'm done with donuts. I could place something in here, but again, I kind of want to leave this space a little bit empty. Why freaking not? The one thing that we could do though is to move the whole area with donuts a little bit to the left. We could make it to make sure that they will stay like in the center, but it's just going to be an element of balancing. So far I'm just going to keep things like this, because I don't think that moving it's going to help us. So again, slight movement could help us though. It's not going to be bad. But it needs to stay in this area. We don't want to create a tangent with this line. So yeah, we could move it, because right now it kind of overweights things a little bit. Maybe we need to think about this though. Yeah, I think we need to move it. something like this. This one kind of looks a little bit better in terms of the placement, because it kind of centers them in here. This one before, and what the heck? One, two. Yeah, putting them right in the center, not that good of an idea, but putting them a little bit to the left and here, it's actually a good idea. Oh, come on, of course this is a good idea. There's a tangent here. It's a pretty clear tangent. How I couldn't see it though. Yes, we definitely need to put it to the left. Just move it to 1, 2. Come on. 1, 2. Yes, and of course we need to now erase the things that we did in the V2 layer. And bring back things in here. That's kind of it, only for this line. So yeah, and again, next time we will continue to work on our suites on the stand, because again, we still need to design a couple of elements for the suite, for the stand, to make sure that we will create the exact composition and storytelling that we want. We're going to work on pies and placing the pies in the proper way. Again, placing donuts was, I wouldn't say not important, but less important than properly placing the pies, because pies are going to, we definitely need to create an empty space for the pie in here. We need to make sure that these pies are going to, not going to create tangents, and it's going to be a little bit harder because it's going to be a different type of shape. So again, by working with these, like the elliptical shapes, it seemed a little bit easier for some reason. Maybe working with the sharp shapes or cubical shapes would be a little bit harder, or maybe it's going to be even easier. We're just going to see it. I don't know. Again, I don't have experience in this, so I could think that it's going to be easy, but it could become harder. Either way, we're not going to speculate. Let's just see what's going to come in the next session. So yeah, again, we will continue to work with the placement of the pies, and the reason why it's super important to properly work on the placement, because it's going to be exactly the area for the viewer to catch up this information from here and move to this pie, piece of pie. So that's why it needs to work. It needs to, we're probably going to create a cyclic motion in here. We're not going to interrupt anything, so these pies are going to strictly distributed. I don't think that we're going to create some type of difference as we created in here, because it's not important. It's just going to distract. We don't have to create any distractions in here. It just needs to be something that will make sure that this motion is going to be fluent. And in order to maintain this flow, we need to make sure that these pies are going to look the way they're probably looking now. Actually could place them just, so yeah, this way they're not not creating any destruction. So you start moving and you will continue movement. Start moving, you will continue movement. But if we're going to put one piece of pie like standing on its back, it will definitely interrupt. It will interrupt in here or whatever. So I will probably place them pretty similar to what we have in here on the sketch. because again I kind of like how it looks already, and the only thing that will change is probably their size and their design. And then of course we will go into the cupcakes. Cupcakes are definitely going to be a little bit bigger. They're too small in here because in comparison to the spherical shaped chocolates with the frosting on them and some type of crushed nuts and whatever, they are too small. They look like mini cupcakes, so they have to be just like cupcakes, regular size, some type of a big shape. So we definitely make them bigger, and we definitely distribute them kind of just random or static, the way that they should be. Maybe we could rotate one of the cupcakes and put it like lie on the stand. We will see. But for these, we don't have that much choice in rotation. No matter how we're going to rotate them, they're going to look the same. Yes, so because they're spheres, for them we probably would just work with how they're going to look. They're going to be one row, or they're going to lie on top of each other, or whatever. So this is the thing to establish. So yeah, these are the elements that we're going to work on the next sessions, and I just saved time for the next sessions without trying to understand what we're going to do next. So yeah, on that note, I guess we'll end the session. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Have a nice day or night, and see you on the next session. And happy holidays. Yep. Bye bye.